in the mid-1800s, two brothers left Derbyshire to come and work in the railway works in Swindon. One of the brothers decided to go back to Derbyshire, but the other wanted to settle in Swindon and brought his wife and family from Derbyshire to settle in Swindon. When his wife died, there was only one child left at home, and his name was Robert. Robert's father married again, and when Robert was a young teenager, his stepmother kicked him out. And like most railway families, Robert went to work in the railways. Later on, he actually went to London with his partner, girlfriend, whose name was Frances Sarah Henrietta Wager. And they settled in London, and again still working in the railway works. They had 4 children. The second child was born in the workhouse in the East End of London. So they must have been very poor. It was common in those days for women to go into the workhouse to have their children. It wasn't necessarily that they were residents in the workhouse. They named this child Robert after his father. When young Robert was 4 years old, he was sent back to Swindon, or sent to Swindon, to live with his aunt Rosamond. Rosamond was the first Robert's sister. And Rosamond was married to Mr. Berry, and young Robert grew up in the Berry household for the rest of his childhood. When the First World War broke out, Robert decided to go to war. He lied about his age. He was actually a year younger, but he actually got in, if you know. He actually went backward and forward to France 3 times. He was gassed, he was injured, he went to a convalescent home in the south coast of Britain. He had a sweetheart in Swindon, and her name was Annie Lillian Alexander. And Annie's father had walked from Bath to work in the railway works. Swindon railways were big then, and it drew in a lot of workers from around. Robert, while in France, sent postcards, the embroidered postcards, to his sweetheart in Swindon. When he came back from war after the First World War was over, Swindon Borough Council presented him with a certificate in honour of him being part, forgotten the word I was going to use, but anyway, for being in the war for Swindon. Annie and Robert got married, and they had 3 children. Their first child was called Robert, and he was later known as Bob. Their second child was Ronald, and their third child was Betty. Just before the Second World War, Bob had married Hazel, and he'd signed up to go to war. So Hazel moved in with her in-laws, and by this time she was already pregnant. Bob was sent abroad. He went to Italy and North Africa and didn't come home for about 4 years. So by the time he came home, his eldest son was 4 years old, and his name was Robert. Robert was then commonly known as Bobby. By the 1960s, Australia was trying to get people to emigrate to Australia because they had a shortage of workforce there, and they were offering £10 tickets to emigrate to Australia. So Bobby, with his wife Jackie, decided to emigrate to Australia. They had 2 children in Australia. The first was called Robert Jr. and the second one is named Anthony. Jackie and Bobby separated, and Bobby married again and had 3 more sons. Robert Jr.'s wife refused to call their firstborn daughter Roberta. So there ended the Roberts. So what's the significance of these 5 generations of Roberts? Well, they happen to share my surname. They were all Walklate, Robert Walklate. So the first one was my great-grandfather, the one that went to London. The second one was my actual grandfather, and that is a picture of him there. And also I have here, the postcards that he sent to my grandmother, Annie Alexander. And here is the certificate that was presented by Swindon in 1919, I think it was, for him serving his country. The third Robert, Bob, was my Uncle Bob. He was the older brother of my father. My father was Ronald. The next one was Bobby, my cousin Bobby, my first cousin. And the last one is Robert Jr. Bobby and Robert Jr. and the rest of the clan are still in Australia. I've never met Robert Jr. But I did put up a picture of Grandad up on Facebook back in 2018, and Robert Jr. said, "Are we related?" Because he's a namesake. So that's 5 generations of one tree of my family, Walklate.